Dear Black women, this podcast is a love letter to you all. This podcast is a space where we give you your flowers for making the world a better place for us all. This podcast is a space where you can take off your crown and the superhero cape and showcase your vulnerability. This is your time to get refreshed and poured into. Black women, you are loved. Black women, you are valuable. Black women, you are beautiful. Not just for all you do, but for who you are. Welcome to the Black Women Save the World podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Montague. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Black Women Save the World podcast. We're super excited for our special guest today, Angela Onwuachi-Willig, the Dean and Ryan Roth Gallo Professor of Law at Boston University School of Law. She is the first Black woman dean of a top 20 ranked law school, a founding member of the Ludi Workshop, which works to increase diversity and improve tenure rates among Black women in the legal academy, and the country's first chaired professor of critical race theory. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and thanks for tuning in. Enjoy. I'm just honored to have this conversation with you as well, and would love to, start off with, who are you, Dean? Were you a good child when you were young? Were you a rebel rouser? Were you shy? Were you extroverted?
Oh, it's such an interesting question. Who am I? When I was a child, I would say I was a good child. I was a pretty straight-laced, obedient child. I was not a rebel rouser. I used my voice, but I wasn't really ever a rebel rouser. I was a kid who loved school. I was a kid who really liked to learn, who liked to engage with people. I liked sports. I had a broad range of interests. And I would say, really interesting, I think all of us are probably this way. I was a lot braver even when I was a child, right? When you're a kid, the world is full of possibilities and you don't know enough to be frightened. And so I was braver, I think, as a child. I think that there were things that I, would pursue that I think as an adult you begin to question yourself more. But I was a lucky child. I grew up in a Nigerian household, a single mother household. My mom raised us alone, but I was fortunate to be loved. I was fortunate to be in a home where I was expected to do well in school, and I was expected to go to college, and all of those things. I think I got older and I realized that those are real privileges to have that. I was also fortunate to be the last kid. I was the last of 5 children. My oldest 3 siblings were from Nigeria. So when I immigrated here, and my youngest brother and I were born in the United States. So I was lucky to be the beneficiary of years of acculturation by the time that I was going through school, by the time that I was thinking about things like college. And I've certainly benefited from that in a way that I think that even my siblings that I benefited from those years of acculturation and just having time to learn how to navigate one's way in the country.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It does sound like such a rich childhood that you had. I want to shift over to your law journey, of course. What was it like for you as a Black woman entering law? Did you have an aha moment of when you were like, I'm called to this for sure?
No, I didn't. I never had an aha moment that I'm called to it. In fact, I thought I had an aha moment the other way. I was really fortunate. Again, I went to school and I grew up in Houston, Texas, which is a very interesting city in a wide variety of ways. I went to very racially and ethnically diverse schools my entire life, socioeconomically diverse, and I think that's in part the result of the fact that there are no zoning laws in Houston, so you could have a very wealthy neighborhood next to an apartment complex, which I grew up in various different apartment complexes. And Houston was also a city in which white flight occurred later than in other cities. And so I had a really interesting and different childhood as a result of that. It's also a southern city, so there was tracking in my school, and I was often the only black kid in the honors classes. And so that shaped my experience in a wide variety of ways. And one of the ways in which it shaped this is I had a teacher in 10th grade, my honor social studies teacher, and I and another black woman were the only two black kids in that class. And Mrs. Nelva Williams was very, very kind and wanted to help us out. And there was an attorney in her church, African American attorney church named Sherman Stimley, the first African American to work at a very, very big law firm in Texas called Vinson & Elkins. He experienced his own forms of racial discrimination in his own practice. And she had asked him to basically sponsor us, to let us work at an internship at his law firm over the summer. And he did. He took me and Jacqueline on, and we did a variety of things. He had us reading Shakespeare plays, and we quizzed us on this, and we didn't really know much law. We weren't really working on law cases, but I think part of it was simply being in the building and within his small firm and seeing him in action and getting exposure to it. But I left that. He did municipal finance law. And I left that thinking, I never want to be a lawyer. I absolutely don't want to be a lawyer. But what I think was really important about that is that by the time I was in college in my junior year and thinking I want to go to law school, is that I knew I could be a lawyer because I'd met Sherman Stimley and because I knew that he could do it. And he looked like me and he had a similar background to me. All those various kinds of things made me know that it was possible. And so you think about those small moments in your life, small moments of kindness. You know, a teacher who was just a great teacher in general and was really a great mentor, but also really a generous mentor to reach out to someone in her church, ask him to hire us, and then also thinking about him doing that, taking on that responsibility to work with two young African American girls over the summer. And so that's really changed, in many ways, it changed my life. But what inspired me to go to law school was really classes in college that exposed me to the ways in which different civil rights groups use the law to advance their causes, exposed me to Thurgood Marshall and people like Constance Baker Motley and people who transformed the lives of African Americans in the United States. And I wanted to understand that tool and be one of the people who was able to use that tool to create change in our society. And I was fortunate to have the ability to do that.
Absolutely. It sounds like mentorship was such a big thing for you in representation as well. People talk about the importance of representation matters, and it clearly shows through your story that it does matter. You mentioned mentorship. Can you talk to us about a few, maybe 2 or 3 Black women mentors that have helped you on your journey in the law field?
Yeah, so probably the most important number of Black women mentors from first grade all the way up until college, right? So, you know, Mrs. Gaines, who was a teacher in my school, was very fortunate because I watched my own kids as they go through school. There aren't as many Black teachers as there were when I was a kid, at least when I was a kid growing up in Houston, Texas. I was fortunate to have a number of Black teachers growing up, or Black teachers who were in my school. I never had Mrs. Gaines, the student, but when I was in first grade, she always took an interest in me and would ask me questions, and I remember having conversations with her and learning things from her, not somebody's class I was ever in. And then I had Mrs. Bryan in third grade. I mean, so these were people I looked up to. I could be like them. So for a long time in my life, I wanted to be a teacher because those were the models that I saw, and I eventually became a teacher as a law professor. But it was really, really hugely important. Again, as you said, representation, mentorship was really, really important. You know, important mentors in my life. One of them would be I had a professor in college called Dr. Keisha Scott, who taught American beliefs and cultural values and a number of other classes. And I remember taking her class my first semester of college and just really wowed by her. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But just wowed by her as a teacher and a scholar. Used a lot of different methods of teaching. It was not simply lecture. It was a lot of participation, a lot of interaction. Was great at helping me become an even better writer. And I think took a very, very serious interest in me in college. And I always think I could not have made it through college without Keisha Scott, not just simply as an academic model, but as someone who I could go to on a campus that was predominantly white, on a campus where I was away from my family, and it's easy to feel lonely and feel lost, and you're grappling with things that you didn't grapple with your entire life before. for the first time. And so to have an African American older woman that I could go to and talk about those things was really, really important to me. But I remember seeing her for the first time and thinking, wow, that's the kind of teacher I want to be. Because at that time I wanted to be a teacher. I wasn't even thinking about being a law professor. And then there have been so many Black women. I've been very, very fortunate in academia to have a number of mentors, mentors who are younger than me and older than me and my same age. It is really one of the things that I think that has allowed me to thrive in my career and in my life, is to have Black women who are a major form of support for me, very, very close friends that I call up, who understand. I don't have to send something because I describe a situation to them and they get precisely what that is. And you certainly can't take that for granted because that's not an everyday experience and interaction. So I've been really fortunate. Everyone from Catherine Smith to Tamara Lawson. Adrienne Wing was a senior professor at University of Iowa when I was pretty early in my career. Evelyn Lewis, who was the only Black woman in the faculty when I started my career as a law professor at UC Davis. I mean, all of these women were really, really fantastic mentors to me. And of course, I've had lots of male mentors of different races, who've been also very, very good to me. I've been incredibly fortunate throughout my career to have incredible mentors, and I think that's really, really critical to success, because mentors give you access to information, and sponsors who have also been very lucky to have are talking you up and helping you advance your career and helping to advance so many other things when you're not even in the room. And I've been lucky to have those people in my life.
Thank you so much for that. Just hearing you speak, you can tell that mentorship and representation is like a thread through the story. And now you are a law professor here at Boston University. This is the question I just thought of. How do you think, as a law professor, you're helping to mentor the next generation of Black lawyers that are coming into your classroom?
Yeah, so I think in a variety of ways. Simply as a teacher and as an academic, when you're teaching people, you're, number one, representation, right? So someone sees someone who looks like them in front of the classroom, and I know how important that can be. But also the insights that I bring. I feel like all of us bring the insights in our background and our experiences with us to everything we do, and particularly to teaching, particularly like, how do you craft a syllabus? What's in your syllabus? Who are the readers? Who are the people that you pick for students to read? How do you lay out the various ways in which you want your class to build on itself? All of those things are shaped by our experiences. And so I bring that experience into how I teach. Of course, it doesn't mean that I'm not open to other different kinds of experiences and views, and you want to have those come out in the class as well, but that lays a foundation. And so I think people often forget, if they're in the majority, that all those things are always there. They may not be visible to them, but they're there. All those assumptions that we bring with us, everything is always there. And so, number one, in the way that I teach, in the goals that I want for my students, I'm trying to get them to think critically about the law. I'm trying to get them to question things they may not have a question, to question the things that they're always constantly assuming, to be able to see what their assumptions are. And I think that's largely shaped by my experience and growing up in a world where there have been a lot of assumptions and rules created based upon assumptions that don't involve my realities. And so having classes and teaching students of all races to engage in that kind of thinking. And I think it's also can be liberating for people who might have a shared experience to see that too, and to see themselves and to hear themselves and to see their experiences in front of the classroom as well. I remember being a law student and constantly going to class and feeling like there were so many things that were left out, the assumptions that were there, the questions that were never asked, and not knowing enough to understand what was the result of all that and how identity shaped all of those things, but knowing that it didn't feel quite right to me. And so I recognize how important that is. And then I think as dean, playing that same role as well, that we don't have as many Black women in leadership roles, and so that's also really important. And you really direct a lot of things. You set the vision, you help to set the vision, you help to direct things, you make decisions about resources. And people always say, you show us your budget and I'll tell you what your values are, right? So all of those things too are ways in which I do it. But, I also very much take mentoring very, very seriously because I've benefited from it so much. And so I'm a very, very active mentor to many people. One of the things I'm most proud of is the Ludier Lato Black Women Law Faculty Workshop, which I started when I was a law faculty member at the University of Iowa, and was started off to really just reduce the tenure gap between women of color and white men, and white faculty in general. And we're now in our 17th year of having the workshop. It's helped dozens of people get onto the job teaching market and get jobs. Helped even more people get tenure. We've helped a lot of people get into administration in terms of being deans, was focused on Black women. And I'm really, really proud of that. Not just proud because mentoring is important to me, but proud because of the community of mentors and the community that we've created to support each other and the way in which we help each other advance as scholars and teachers and human beings. And so I take that very seriously. I've always been involved in various different kinds of mentoring, involved in LACRIT. I used to work on the Junior Faculty Development Workshop every year, help planning with that. When I was younger, I haven't done that in several years. I've been focused primarily on the Lytle, and Quality Law Scholars is another thing that I co-founded with two friends of mine, Professor Tristan Green and Professor Libby Saucedo. And I take mentorship incredibly seriously because I think just having access to information and knowing how do you navigate your way through all these different spaces where there are all these unwritten rules, and you wouldn't know how to do it unless people told you how to do it. And so I take that really seriously, and I feel like I owe it because I've benefited so immensely from having good mentors.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to something you loosely touched on, which was how your experience in law school. Being a Black woman, I know that experience, but I don't know it from a law school perspective. But I would love to hear from you, and I think our audience will really benefit from what is it like for you coming into the predominantly white institution, going into the law field. What was it like for you when you were in law school? Was there an experience that really stood out to you, that really helped you to see that there's really a need for diversity in this field? There's really a need for my expertise, my presence in this field to make a difference.
Yeah, so a number of experiences, obviously. I mean, when I went to law school, my law school didn't have very many Black faculty at all, very many faculty of color at all. There was one Black woman faculty member at the time, and people talked really very negatively about her. Highly accomplished, and people talked very, very negatively about her, certainly very racist in the way that people spoke about her to students. And I decided, actually my third year, I began to take one of her classes, and the way in which students spoke to her and challenged her, white students, largely white men in class, it was so painful to me that I had to drop, because I was like, I can't literally spend the whole semester vicariously experiencing the abuse that she's taking. There's a part of me that says, oh gosh, I wish I had stayed to contest, but I just was not in a space where I could take that, seeing that every day. But when I was a first year professor, I had no women professors. I did not have one female professor, and I did not have one professor of color my entire first year of law school. And that was hard in a lot of ways. I mean, there were great professors, but not seeing any kind of reflection of yourself, not in terms of gender or race. I did have one professor who was a torts professor who was from a more lower socioeconomic background, and so I could identify with him in a wide variety of ways, and he spoke openly and honestly about that, and I appreciated that very much. But there would be moments where I raised a question about race or socioeconomic class that I saw in a case. And what I didn't understand at the time is not that the professor didn't think it was important, but that they didn't know how to engage with it. And a lot of my friends who were women of color, Black women in particular, experienced that too when they would raise issues. And I have a better sense now as a faculty member working with faculty that it's not that they don't want to engage it, but they're kind of frightened to engage. They don't feel like they know how to engage those questions, particularly if they didn't think about them, right? And I'm not saying that excuses it at all, but I think the way I experienced it was that they saw it as not being important. And I think the way that we all experienced this, they saw it as not being important. And so I have a lot of memories about that. a lot of memories about who was encouraged to apply for various different things like clerkships or particular various different kinds of goodies in law school. I think law schools were like that. I think, they have changed. I think they're probably more supportive. There's certainly more faculty of color at various different law schools now. I think that there's certainly more diversity among the students, although there was more diversity among the student body. Who knows how that will change? It's still, I hear from students some of the same things all over the country. I hear from students all over the country that they're grappling with some of the same things that we grappled with when we were law students, and that can be very depressing and sad. But I think that in general, things are getting better, and I hope that they continue to get better. It's slow. It's not moving quickly enough, but I think that students today have a different experience than I had when I was a law student.
Thank you for your vulnerability on that, just to hear from someone so accomplished as yourself, to just show us that you had your struggles as well. So I really appreciate that. I want to shift over to a lighter note, maybe a more personal aspect. What do you do for self-care? You're so busy, you have so much going on. I'm sure so many people wanting your attention or needing you. What do you do for self-care?
Yeah. What I would say is that I have not historically been great at self-care, and I'm working on it very much. I'm an active work in progress in many ways, but certainly on self-care. But one of the things I do is I try to spend time with my family, my husband and my children, who are fantastic, the people who make me happiest in life. And that is definitely one of the things I engage in with self-care, just simply even like getting out and having alone time, a walk with my husband, various different kinds of things, watching bad TV together, watching a movie, traveling. I've done more traveling now, and I love music, so I've made a point of going to more concerts. That's another thing. So I think just generally treating myself more. I think like many women, I was one of those people who was easy to treat everybody else and get something for everybody else and do things for other people and to forget yourself. And I think I've been working in the last few years, couple of years, of being more deliberate about also treating myself and cutting myself some slack.
Yeah, it sounds like your family is such a source of strength for you and a chance to refill your own cup as well. You've accomplished so much, Dean. You have amazing awards, so many, and you have accomplished great things. What is next for you? What do you hope to accomplish next? What do you hope that your legacy will be?
Oh, legacy, that's a tough question. I haven't thought through that. I hope that I get to continue to do things where I can have an impact on education and helping people have the same opportunities that I've been so fortunate to have in my life. So I know that I want to continue to have that kind of impact, and that could be that I'm returning to the faculty and getting back into the classroom every day. I don't know what that step looks like, what that next step looks like. I'm trying to figure what that step looks like, and also thinking about self-care too. But I also have a lot of other things. Like I love writing, and I want to explore different kinds of writing time to explore all the dreams or various different dreams that I have. And that's hard to do, right? Because you're always so busy and you're like, I've got to do this job, or I've got to do this, or I've got to help this person, and it's easy to forget about your own dreams. And so I think for me, what's hard for me is making time for my own dreams, like whatever they might be, whether it's writing a book, a fiction book, or, there are all kinds of things that I think I would love to do. And in terms of my legacy as a leader in academia, my big, big dream, if anyone's listening, Mackenzie Scott or anyone who wants to fund this, my big, big dream is that BU would become the first law school that meets the full need of its students, the full financial need of its students. Because law schools in general do primarily what they call merit aid, which is aid based on things like LSAT scores and GPA. And the way that works out is that it ends up that higher wealth, higher income students tend to get the better scholarships. And I think about my own experience as someone who went to college at a place that was need blind, that met my full need. And that maybe being need blind isn't as important, but meeting the full need is really, really critical. And that opened up so many possibilities for me. It relieved me of some stresses that would have come with high debt. It allowed me to think more broadly about the things that I might have wanted to do in my life. And I really wish that for so many more people. And so that's my big dream, is that we would do that. And I think that would have a transformative impact, not just on BU law, but on legal education in general, because other schools would feel pressure to follow suit. And I think that would just open up legal education, legal profession, and making it even far more accessible than it is now. I think also feeling like the lives of students who otherwise might have been ignored or paid less attention to better. And that's always part of any legacy that I would be really proud of. Being known for helping to transform a culture in a way that made it not only even more excellent in all the traditional ways, but more excellent in terms of the community and inclusiveness is the legacy that I really hope to fulfill. And I think we're engaged in that work, and we're doing that work, and I think we're seeing the results of it. Still have a long way to go, but we're definitely seeing the results of it, and so I'm proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to hear you talk about the importance of really leaving the door open and having the resources necessary for other students, particularly those that are often ignored, to be able to come in and to follow your footsteps is very powerful as a legacy. And on that, I would love to ask you, what would your advice be for a Black woman out there who maybe wants to follow your footsteps someday into law, or just inspired by your story? What would your advice be to them on their journey towards success?
I think my advice to them would be to believe in your magic. So we like to talk about Black girl magic. And I think that one of the things that I didn't appreciate until I was far too old is that I was building tools all along because of ways in which I had to learn to navigate my way through the world. I was building all these tools that people around me weren't building, and they were preparing me to do the things that I'm doing now, and I didn't realize it. And it's easy, I think, to be in this world, particularly if you don't come from it, right? And you see, you come in and with people who've kind of grown up in a kind of particular world, and they know how to talk the talk and use a particular language, and was learning along the way to have more doubts in yourself and to not see all the things that you're bringing that other people don't have as a result of not having your experiences. Sometimes I would think of something and I would be like worried about saying it in class or worried about saying it in a meeting because I was like, well, clearly everybody else sees it. And one of the things that I realize now is that often other people aren't seeing it. And they aren't seeing it because they don't have the various different experiences and backgrounds and all those kinds of things that I'm bringing, and just believing in your magic and believing in the unique contributions that you can make and how important they are, and believing that all the challenges and hurdles and barriers that you face are preparing you for things that you may not even realize are preparing you for.
To just hear that, to really own your own magic is super powerful. And I'm sure it's super powerful to all the Black women out there who are looking to you as a role model. I would love to ask you, what would you say to the little girl that you were? What would your advice be to her, as she is probably super proud of where you are, but probably has no idea of the journey that's ahead of her? What would your advice be to keep her on the right track?
That's a great question. The advice, so some of it would be some of the same advice, but I think that I would tell her, trust your instincts, trust yourself, and if you're thinking it or questioning it, there's a reason why. So I think that if I have any regrets at all, it's because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my instincts. And so that's what I would tell her when I look back. I would say, believe in your magic. Also, trust your instincts. They're there for a reason. They've built up for a reason. You have those instincts for a reason, so trust yourself there. Even as an adult, I should tell myself that.
It's so good. Is there a professional regret where you wish you had trusted your instincts that you could share?
One thing that comes to mind, somebody asked me to argue a transformative case, and I was, for a variety of reasons, number one, I was in Iowa and I wasn't yet barred there. So that was one of the reasons, but I certainly could have before the argument happened. It was the same-sex marriage case in Iowa. And my instincts were telling me to do it, but I was a little scared. And I thought, I have this hurdle at the bar, and I've got to do this. And I was really worried about it. But I mean, it's such an important moment when I think back on it to have not trusted my instincts to take that opportunity. I worked on other things that helped to push that further, and obviously so many more people who really dedicated their lives to this work. Even if I did this argument, I would have been coming on the tail end of so much of what generations of people had built. But not trusting my instincts there, to me, that's a pretty big opportunity and a big moment, and something I very, very deeply believe in. And now that I have children who are directly affected by a decision like that, I mean, I'm mad at myself sometimes that I wasn't brave enough to think I could do it well enough.
Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of imposter syndrome. I know that's something I personally struggle with, even being here on campus. It's like, I don't have the experience of doing what other people have had the experience of doing. So just to hear that that's something that other accomplished professionals go through and have those moments is super powerful, to know that we can have them, but we can also overcome them.
Yes. 100%. And one of my favorite quotes since I moved to Boston, which is hockey city, is Wayne Gretzky's quote that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So I always tell that to students.
I would love to ask you, when it comes to serving the community, you are a powerful Black woman serving the community through law. What is your favorite aspect of doing that?
By far my favorite is working with young people. Working with young people, teaching them, mentoring them, students especially. But not just because I think it's really important and because those things changed my life, but because I learned so much from them and I gained so much from them. I get their hope. They give me hope. I talk to my students and they're so smart and I'm so impressed by them and they have so much desire to change the world. I just love it. And I often think I was never like that when I was their age. It's inspiring. And so it's not just that I think that I get to help them, but they help me in so many ways. They give me hope. They're inspiring. I get to gain from their enthusiasm for life and their belief in the ability to change things that maybe I, in my older age, have become a little jaded about. That's by far the best thing.
It sounds like your students are such a rich source for you as well, to become more inspired again and to keep the fire burning. So that's incredible to hear. I just wanted to thank you so much, Dean, for coming, and thank you for saving the world as a Black woman through law. It is so important and critical, especially in these times. And I really appreciate your time today.
Wow, such a great conversation today. Thank you so much to Angela Onwuachi-Willig for joining us and for truly being a Black woman who saves the world. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to subscribe to my podcast and never miss an episode. Also, check us out on our various social media channels, including our Instagram, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube accounts. Tune in to the next podcast episode for my interview with Celia Blue, President and CEO, visionary and founding member of Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, Inc. It'll be a conversation you won't want to miss. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.